Hello and welcome everyone in our another episode of Researcher Celebrity. And today we have a graduate student with us who's pursuing his PhD, and his name is Sayan Chakraborty. Sayan has done his bachelor's from Calcutta University and master's from Pondicherry University, after which he joined National Institute of Immunology for his PhD. Welcome, Sayan, and thank you very much for taking the time out. Let's start with the initial journey. Like when Shan was a student, has he ever thought that he want to be in research?
First of all, thank you for having me. And I come from a typical Bengali family, and as you might know, in Bengalis, education is a big deal. Literature, like from a very young age, parents push their kids to excel in academics. So kids from a very young age try to say that they want to become writers and advocates, doctors and engineers. I was a different kid, like from like from a very early age, from standard 7 or standard 8, I wanted to become a scientist. I
Wow.
always wanted to become a scientist because the concept of which is the basic principle of a PhD, the concept of adding something to the existing pool of knowledge,
Nice.
that uh, that that drove me the most. That drove me the most.
Wow. So as you said, at the in the seventh and eighth standard, you wanted to be a scientist. What was the reason, or what was the motivation that like a youngster, a very youngster, has thinking of becoming a scientist? Like, what was your inspiration at that point of time?
Again, coming from a Bengali culture, we have a rich pool of scientists like Meghnad Shah, Jagdish Chandra Bose, and everyone. Well, I wanted to become a physicist initially, but then, as fate turns out, I was very poor in maths. So I went into biology. I'm not saying that people poor in maths should go into biology. It's nothing like that. But I eventually fell in love with chemistry and biology. So yeah, I'm here today.
Yeah, nice, nice. So, how your journey? Because you were a dedicated researcher, and now I can say, because who has chosen his path in seventh and eighth standard and wanted to be a scientist, and almost there. Now you are about to finish your PhD. Is there any difference when Shayan was in seventh standard and now when he's almost about to finish his PhD? What is the difference between two of the researchers?
So I would say that Shayan of the early days can still be traced till my PhD first year.
Mhm,
And the Shayan of the reality that is today is
mhm,
after like second year of my PhD or something. Like initially when I joined, or when I was in my graduation or masters, I used to think that okay, I'll do paradigm shifting science and big things in science. But then as it turns out, it is much difficult than it is actually thought of. And after second year of my PhD, with the infrastructure that we have in our country, which is now very good, to take baby steps and then progress into doing something big.
So, what are your plans for? Have you already started for looking for postdocs, or you are thinking that once you will be done with the PhD?
So, so usually the process is that once your paper is out and you're in the process of writing your thesis, you look for PhD labs. But since I have worked equally in two different fields, my pool of PIs that I want to work with is a lot.
Mhm,
So before going on to that stage, at
mhm,
this moment, I'm shortlisting down to a smaller pool.
mhm,
Like now, I'm shortlisting the entire list to a pool of 40-50 scientists,
mhm,
which I'll keep for now. And
mhm,
once my thesis paper is in communication, I'll start writing to them.
Nice. That was a very brilliant piece of advice. I think all the researchers should follow this, that you have to make a bigger pool and then the smaller pool as you walk towards your award of your PhD. So, Sayan, what are your plans? Are you thinking to join academia or you want to go to industry?
Well, the heart says academia always, but then the current openings that are there in academia also, if you think about it purely on a financial basis, uh, the industrial sector is a much more lucrative option.
Mm-hmm.
Given the opportunity, I will always choose academia, but for now, I want to keep both my options open.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
both of them after I do a substantial postdoctoral work.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So when so now when you are finishing or wrapping up your PhD, how do you see this, that if you want to apply for a lab or a position, you want to put yourself for a challenge or you want to work in your comfort zone? How do you
It's a
plan that
mix of
thing?
both. It's a mix
Mm-hmm.
of both actually, because to be honest, we come from a place or a country where science is slowly developing. It is slowly emerging into a good option for many people, and the investment that is going, the government investment that is going into the science is also increasing much more. So. Uh, it's basically when you opt for a postdoctoral position,
Mm-hmm.
the scientist looks at the skill set. What can you do? And the more it overlaps with your existing skill set, the more the chances is you getting into that lab. But then what are you learning new?
Mm-hmm.
So there you have to hit a balance between yourself, your skill set, and the PI you are applying to. Okay, I know this bit
Mm-hmm.
you need in your lab, and I want to learn these things from the lab to broaden my spectrum of skills. It's a sweet spot in between.
That sounds like a very passionate researcher making his choices and making the balance. So when so the journey, if you don't mind, that if you can share the journey from the idea of becoming a researcher and now you are a researcher, how was the journey?
Well, to start with, I when looking at it in isolation, I would say that the journey was good. But when I am at this stage of my researching career, I would say that, and interacting with many students from abroad, I would say that our generation of students did not get much focus or attention to research. Now I see that many colleges put their students into 2 months or 3 months of research experience in labs. Master 6 months dissertation has changed to even a 1 year dissertation. So that way, yes, but even if that is the case, there will always be a pool of very motivated and self-driven students who would want to go into research.
Mhm. You said self-driven and passionate. How you have been coping up with the experimental results when sometimes they are in very much the way you want and anybody and everyone is happy, but how you handle once they are not what you are expecting?
Well, most of the times the experiment doesn't work. Well, that is the thing. It's not sometimes that your experiment works, it's most of the time the experiment doesn't work. So here in that case, I would like to share a small story that one of my seniors from this lab once shared to me. So, like the eukaryotic genome has introns and exons. Introns are not expressed, and the exons are small bits in the middle, which is actually expressed. So he once told me that if your entire PhD journey is a eukaryotic gene and your thesis are exons. So you'll see that out of the 6 years or 7 years that you're working, your thesis is actually a good 1 year of work, 1 year, 1.5 years of work. So
Okay.
most of the time that you spend in the lab is actually troubleshooting experiments, making new experiments, standardizing experiments, and the part where you get the data is actually very less. So more the exons in your thesis life, better are your results and better are your perspectives.
Nice. Well said. This is the first time when I'm listening to this, but I can totally correlate with it. And I don't think that many people can deny what the way you have explained neatly. So when you were facing any of those introns, what were your
My
reactions?
beach, my beach life has been full of introns. Like it has, like the exons are, you have to look through a microscope.
Uh-huh.
So I have faced huge amount of troubles and problems in my PhD life. Uh, Biggest problem being which young researchers should know is to uh, find a good PI. And by good PI, I am not doubting any PI's scientific caliber. It's the chemistry that you and your PI have. That is
Right.
what I mean by a good PI.
Mhm.
And also I had some health issues which I had to address to, and that both of that has been sorted, and I I was thinking that I would be set back by around 2.5 years,
Mhm.
but I have like pulled up my socks, and hopefully by end of this year I'll be submitting. So I'm losing out by a year. I've made up 1.5 years.
Mhm. Wow, that was like sounds like intense work, huh? Sleepless
Intense.
nights.
Not really, not really. It's more of a well-planned approach than to
Nice.
slog mindlessly in the lab till late nights.
Hmm.
Which which I feel that researchers in India should address to, and young researchers should know that, because we as a society here, we tell that, oh, this student is working from morning 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night,
Yep.
but we incentivize that. We have started to incentivize inefficiency.
Hmm.
For a good PhD, for a good thesis, you do not need to work from 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night.
Well said.
You do not need.
Hmm.
That is
So
purely my personal opinion, but yeah.
no, but I think the 2 points which you just mentioned, first one about the troubleshooting, the second one about the time management. I think in research, troubleshooting is what it, as people said, that skill set. I think if you can troubleshoot, that is a very big trouble, skill set to have it, because that has been seen that people just follow a path. So there are two type of researchers: one who just follow the path which has already been led, and another one, people who want to explore, who want to walk on the paths which were not even reported yet.
Hmm.
So both have their own pros and cons. And what we can understand from your view, you are an exploratory researcher. You want to do something new. You want to add
Yeah.
something new to the pool. That's how you see a PhD and research as. That's very, very important part. And as you mentioned about the time management also, that is one thing which people, uh, not most of the students actually in their initial ages, they struggle with it, but once they know how to make the work and life balance, that is what something which trains them for the time management.
Because eventually your body will not agree with you. Because
Absolutely.
we get into a PhD when we are 23. Like
Uh-huh.
we have all gone through our school lives, right? So
Mhm.
morning 7 o'clock, you wake up, play football, go to school till 4 o'clock, come back again, go and play cricket, then go to tuitions till 9 o'clock, come back again, study again, then wake up the next morning. If we do that in this stage, we'll be dead the next day. So 23-year-old can slog till 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock at night. But
Mhm.
I'm not saying a 28-year-old, 29-year-old is like old. but then your family responsibilities come and catch you. There's much more things to sort out. And yeah, and the part where you said about exploring, one example I would give, our work on COVID-19. So our lab was one of the first labs to repurpose cancer drugs for the treatment of COVID-19, and it was very successful. So we had no experience in working with radioactivity. We are slowly working on it, but at that time we did not have. And working with radioactivity is one of the cruxes of kinase assays. It is very important. So I had to develop another, like, we had to catch our nose the other way around to get that thing done and not use radioactivity, because at that time COVID was on a record high, and we just could not wait for all the red tape and like waiting for the licensing and all the paperwork that's got to happen before we work with radioactivity. So we had to go for a different approach, and we got it done.
Yeah, so that is like when some people might see that as a hurdle, but the researchers become more innovative, and that's when they discover new things, as this is what you are saying.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention.
Absolutely. But it is like you have to have this attitude of never give up also, because that was the time when everyone was struggling. Either it is a researcher or a common man, because of the reagents were not coming. And that's why I think the independence became even more, handy, that if you are independent enough as a researcher, you can plan your experiments, you can do your own research with the minimal guidance. I think that is also one of the most important things when you are pursuing your PhD, because the guide should not spoon feed you. You should have your own problem, and then the guide is there to mentor you that, okay, there are some things which can be done this way and the other way also. So how you think that the role of picking a PI is important for a long-term PhD, or like if say on an average of 5 years of PhD? Because you did mention briefly about the chemistry between the PI, but when a person is looking for the labs, what are their resources or what they can do to know more about the lab?
Honestly, it's a lot about luck. Depends from the institute where you're going, and depends you what kind of a student you are. Because I know there are students who, I wouldn't say they are not innovative, but they need a bit of more guidance in that area, but they're extremely hardworking people. On the other hand, there are students like me who want a free hand at their work. And we find ways to cut out long hours. Let me put that way. So you need to find out what suits you the best. Because obviously, if your PI is putting in the hard yards to troubleshoot your experiment, he would want you to be the menial labor part of it.
Nice.
So, and also there is a bit of ambiguity, because when a new person comes and he's about to give an interview to an institute, he doesn't know what the lab is like.
Yes.
And papers don't mean everything.
Absolutely.
Papers don't mean everything, because those papers are not going to give you a peace of mind for the 6 years you're going to stay there.
Yes.
The lab atmosphere will, your PI will. So you just look through the website of your lab and you see this, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God, such good papers. Let me join here. And when you finally join, the reality hits. I'm not saying that labs who publish well are very strict and put you under the hammer always. But yeah, more often than not. More often than not. So initially, the system that was there in NII, I would suggest that to be present in all the institutes. It's a 6 month it's a 6 months rotation. Yes,
Okay.
you are losing out on 6 months on your PhD tenure because that 6 months won't be counted, but that is a fail-safe option to not end up in the wrong lab. And by wrong lab, I mean non-compatible lab. Every lab is doing their good work in their own fine way. There's no digressing from that. So for 6 months, you are in a lab and you see what's there, what happens, what's the atmosphere is like, what is your chemistry like with your PI, and more importantly, with the fellow students
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
So if it works, fine. If it doesn't, after 6 months, you can move to another lab. And also, unlike my institute, there are many institutes which do not give the option of changing their labs midway into their PhD. Like, I won't name that person. I know he was a good friend of mine in college. He went to a very good institute in Bombay for PhD. Unfortunately, he had a very bad tussle with his PI, and since he could not change the lab midway and go to a different lab, he had to leave PhD altogether. I have seen students who leave PhD in their 5th years. So that is bad. That is bad, and that has to change.
Absolutely. So, based on your experience and your peers, what you gather and interact with, what do you think that what is the reason when a hardworking researcher giving up in the 5th year where they are almost done?
That is mostly the pressure of expectations, and it usually happens right after 5th year, because 5th year, it means that researcher is around 27, 28 years old, and after 5th year the fellowship stops. And at 27, 28 years old, you are not going to ask for sustenance money from your parents. And when you see and learn from your PI that it's still going to take 2 years and things don't look good in your lab and you won't be getting paid for those 2 years, you would look into your options and you would think that, okay, if I had completed my degree with a PhD, I would be treated as a fresher in a company, but with a PhD. But if I leave now, I can tell that company that I have 5 years of experience. So then your PhD, your incomplete PhD works as a 5-year project fellowship. And you say that, okay, I have this 5 years of experience, take me in your company. And you get through like that.
Wow. Never saw the things that way.
It's mostly financial more than anything else most of the time.
Aren't there any support system? Because I think the situation you mentioned here is something which happens almost most part of the India. So how isn't there any specific system functioning for this? Because I know some of the institutes, they have a very leisure, bridging postdocs program. So once you are done with your thesis, either you have submitted or not, so they give you 1 or 2 years so that you can bridge into some other places. And
that
if it is,
depends on the PI. That depends on the PI. But this, what you said, that happens also. But then there are other situations where the PI says that, look, it's going to be another 2 years or 3 years that you'll get your PhD. So like buckle up. It mostly stems from a very bad student PI relationship.
so there is no system to support these students, like at institutional basis or in some other different levels of administration, if someone can approach?
Of course, there are committees, but then who sits in those committees? Other PIs do. And obviously, the first priority is to keep the PIs happy.
Okay. But no, so what I'm asking is from the student's perspective. if somebody is doing or planning to do this, if a friend of yours is saying, mentioning this, because when you guys interact, all of the researchers, when they are sitting out of the lab, out of the institutes and sharing their experiences, how do you, like, what do you suggest, or
Oh,
how can you support?
I got your question. There are like in art institute there are systems called when we joined it was the DC protocol.
Mm-hmm,
Now it is the rack system. So in the rack system they have an assessment of your work every 6 months.
mm-hmm,
So, and for every PhD student, there is his own guide, and then there are two internal adjudicators and one
mm-hmm,
external adjudicator for
mm-hmm,
your thesis.
mm-hmm,
So they determine how your work is going. You give presentations of your work every 6 months, and so that is a check valve. That this system has prevented uh, students from staying in PhD for 7 years, 8 years,
mm-hmm,
and now most of them are leaving on time. So this has
mm-hmm.
been a good change of things.
Oh, that is
This was a
very
welcome change.
soothing. Yeah, that is
This
very
is a
soothing
welcome
to
change.
know. That is very soothing to know. And here, I think when your work is evaluated every 6 months, so PI and student both have this credibility to get everything compiled and finished within 5 years. I think that is
Yeah.
a very good thing to do. Very good. And
But
now we are.
I'll just interject once.
Mhm,
But one might say that it affects the quality of your work.
mhm.
So the other clause is that to submit your thesis, you need one first author paper.
Okay.
So unless you get one first author paper, you cannot submit.
Mhm.
So then it's a balance in favor of the PI and there is a balance in favor of the student.
Nice. I think that should be the way how everyone should look into. Like it
Yeah,
is just a win-win situation for both PI and the student.
yeah.
So now we are almost to our time. I want to know that how do you see when a person or a peer of yours comes with their problems and you have your own? Because you also mentioned this point that the harmony in the lab is one of the important things which people should pay attention to. So when you
Sure.
are dealing with your own uh, matter
Demons.
and people comes and interact, how do you see that as cooperative in the lab?
Depends on who is asking.
Mm-hmm,
Because if it's my batchmate,
mm-hmm,
I will deal it in my own way,
mm-hmm,
like as friends, between friends. But obviously, when a junior comes, like I'm in 6th year, if a first year junior comes or a second year junior comes, the responsibility is much more.
very good.
The responsibility is much more. As a senior, it is your responsibility to make your juniors feel at home in the lab.
Beautiful.
It's not only the PI's responsibility.
Mm-hmm,
We, as I would like to see, we as future PIs, it is our
mm-hmm.
responsibility to keep our juniors happy in the lab.
Nice. And I think you have raised a nice point that you are mentor towards when you are finishing your PhD, you are into a shape of mentoring and you are mentoring your peers and learning from them and getting trained for the mentorship, which is very important in your future. And I think in everyone's future. That's a very valid point. So, at last, about if you can tell that whatever you have learned from your PhD, and if you have to suggest a person who's coming to you either in their bachelor's, in master's, and when they really want to join a lab for their PhD, what are your specific crux points?
Number one, do not join a PhD if you think it as a way to earn a monthly salary. It doesn't
Very
work
well.
that way. Number two is only get into a PhD are if you are in love with science, basically.
Mhm.
If you are in love with science. And third is, and which is the most important of all the three to any student who joins the PhD, it ends well. Don't worry. It ends well.
Nice, nice. Thank you
It
very
works
much,
out eventually.
Sayan. Sayan,
Thank
it was a pleasure to have you and to listen your thoughts. And I'm taking this from Sayan that Sayan's email ID will be displayed in the link of this YouTube video. And if you have any specific question, because as we have seen, Sayan is very, a very good mentor, and he can be more in person when you want to contact him for any support which you want, or you can contact through Empowering Science Foundation, where we organize and bring all the researcher celebrities. And thank you very much, Sayan, for taking time for us.
I'm very happy to receive any questions on my email. I'm happy to help everyone. And thank you for this wonderful session. And thank you for having me.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good luck.